Welcome to Kansas Ag Report. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, October is Cooperative Month in Kansas, and we'll talk with Brandi Miller, the president and CEO of the Kansas Co-op Council. We'll also have features from Kansas Corn, Kansas Wheat, and the Kansas Farm Bureau, and the weekly update from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agriculture news, agricultural producers' sentiment declined for the second month in a row in September. That's in the Purdue University CME Group Ag Economy Barometer. It fell 9 points to a 106 reading. Producers expressing concern about both the current situation as well as future prospects on the farm. The current condition and future expectation indices both declined some 10 points in September, leaving the current conditions index at 98. The future expectation index stood at 109. Weakening prices for major crops and ongoing concerns about high production costs and interest rates weighing on producers' minds this month. September's declines left all three indices below year-ago levels. Now, despite the weak sentiment in reading, producers remain relatively optimistic about farmland values and expressed both short and long-term farmland value indices. The September survey also included several questions to learn about cover crops. Just over half of the corn and soybean growers that were surveyed said they currently plant cover crops on at least a portion of their acres. Well, USDA this week announced $27.6 million in grants to underserved and veteran farmers, ranchers, and foresters. The funding will provide training, outreach, and technical assistance to help them own and operate successful farms, ranches, and forest lands. The funding made possible through USDA's 2501 program. That's administered by the USDA Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement. In 2023, the funding supports grants to 41 organizations in 27 states for their efforts to provide outreach and technical assistance to underserved and veteran farmers and ranchers. The 2501 program was created through the 1990 Farm Bill to help underserved farmers, ranchers, and foresters who had historically experienced limited access to assistance from USDA. Then the 2014 Farm Bill expanded the program to include veterans. Grants are awarded to higher education institutions and nonprofit and community-based organizations to extend USDA's engagement efforts in underserved and veteran communities. Since 2010, the 2501 program has provided more than $221 million to fund more than 657 projects. And households spend more money on food as their incomes rise, but the amount spent represents a smaller share of the overall budget, that according to USDA's Economic Research Service. When U.S. households were divided into 5 equal groups by household income, households in the lowest income group had an average after-tax income of just a little bit over $16,000, spent an average of $5,090 on food, about $98 a week in 2022. Now, households of the highest income group, an average after-tax income of over $196,000, spent an average of $15,713 on food, about $302 a week. And as households gain more disposable income, they often move to more expensive food options. Food spending as share of income rose across all income groups in 2022 as food prices increased faster than the overall inflation. Food spending in 2022 represented a 31.2% of the group's income, 13.4% of income for a middle group, and 8% income for the highest earners. Stay with us. We'll have more when we return on the Kansas Ag Report.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
Well, October brings us Cooperative Month, And especially here in Kansas is what we want to talk about today. We're pleased to be joined by Brandi Miller, who is the president and CEO of the Kansas Cooperative Council. Hi, Brandi.
Hi, Ken. How are you doing? So great to see you.
Well, it is always great to catch up with you, and especially of a month of celebration. Now, of course, cooperatives are all over the state and all different, and we're going to talk about maybe something you didn't think was a cooperative is, and also the impact that it has on the economy and just the general well-being of Kansas. So, I think again, as we talk cooperatives, first thing we think is grain elevators and agricultural, but that's a big part. But what there are a lot of different companies that actually are cooperatives.
You're absolutely correct. So we do work with a lot of grain marketing and ag supply cooperatives. But in addition, you can also find credit unions and farm credit. And a lot of the electric is supplied by rural electric cooperatives as well in the state of Kansas. And what some folks don't know is that you can actually find housing cooperatives as well in Kansas and a few other types of businesses that are structured as cooperatives as well.
And one of those that is also really involved in helping form not only your group, but we've got folks at K State, and K State has been one of those that has helped a lot of cooperatives get formed and to kind of help them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an amazing partnership with K State. Actually, there is the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center located at Kansas State University. And Dr. Brian Brigham, is the faculty member that oversees that program. And he actually sits as an advisory member on the council's board. And so, great relationship there. We do a lot of training with them and a lot of education across the state in the value of cooperative structured businesses and the value that they provide, not just locally in the rural communities where they typically serve, but also just the larger impact to the state as a whole.
I can remember a few years ago, they said, well, what's going to be the future of cooperatives? Because some businesses, especially agribusiness, got bigger and bigger. And thought, well, is the need going to be there for cooperatives? But Brady, I think your members have shown really in the last decade, 15 years, that they've kind of redoubled their efforts and really are bringing value back to those members.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're still seeing changes across the state and the structures of the businesses, especially in the ag space. But I think that's reflective of what's happening in production agriculture. I mean, we're seeing a lot larger farmers. And so, in order to support those farmers, we need larger businesses to do that. I think cooperatives provide a huge value across the state of Kansas and across the US, honestly, and it allows producers to have a collaborative, cooperative voice when they are thinking about production and marketing and just coming together and providing a service collectively.
Brandi Miller is the president and CEO of the Kansas Cooperative Council. October is Cooperative Month here in the state. We're going to take a break, come back, and talk a little more about the impact that co-ops are having in the state of Kansas. We'll do that in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And our guest is Brandi Miller, who is the president and CEO of the Kansas Cooperative Council. October is Cooperative Month in Kansas. And before we maybe get a big, broad picture of cooperatives around the U.S., let's talk about one that I am learning more and more about, and that is cotton production and how some of those cooperatives are really adding a lot, especially to southern Kansas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been exciting to see the growth of cotton in the state of Kansas. Kansas actually used to be a pretty big producer of cotton and then kind of switched gears and focused more on some of what we see more traditionally and think about as far as Kansas is concerned, but they've started ginning down in the southern part of the state, and we're expecting big things. The cotton industry has had some challenges this last year with weather, but the southern part of Kansas really is carrying the load, and we have some fantastic cooperatives located down in the southern part of Kansas that are really leading the charge. I found out Monday they just started ginning. So
Wow. Well, I tell you, it's one of those things that, you may have, like I grew up on the farmed. The cotton industry is completely different for this old Kansas, kind of this old Kansas weedy. I have heard quite a bit of how cotton and the role it can play in the economy here in the state. We don't think much about it, but there are several acres. And so that's another crop that is very critical to good weather conditions. So, Brandi, let's maybe get the broad picture of cooperatives around the country. Kansas is one of 50 states, but again, as we look at the broader picture, a lot of folks are mobile, get around and maybe see different companies, different things. You got any numbers of where we are kind of nationally with the cooperatives?
yeah, absolutely. So since we're talking about cotton, I can focus a little bit on the ag space first. There's around 1,600 ag cooperatives, and they actually generate about $300 billion in revenue for America's farmers. And there's around 10,000 business locations of agricultural cooperatives. But if we look at large picture of all the cooperatively structured businesses in the United States, there's actually more than 30,000 cooperatives. And that includes food, grocery, ag, as we've talked about, retail, purchasing, work cooperatives, utility, and financial cooperatives. They count for more than 2 million jobs across the United States. And even in Kansas, that number is pretty significant considering. And they generate collectively more than 700 billion in annual revenue. The cooperative model has been around for a long time, actually pre-United States formation, and came over from Europe. And so it's got a long, strong history, not just in the United States, but actually in the world.
How easy is it to form a cooperative in Kansas or somewhere else? Does it just take two?
No, it's actually not easy. There's a little bit of work that has to go in, and it really depends on the type of cooperative structure that you're looking into. Producer cooperatives have different requirements than maybe a retail or maybe a home cooperative, for example, or a living cooperative. And so it just really depends on the type of business structure that you're looking at. Certainly any type of business can operate cooperatively. There's nothing restricting that behavior, but from an actual using the cooperative in your name, there are some legal requirements that are in statute, actually.
All right, Brandi. Now, if folks want to learn more about the impact that cooperatives have in Kansas, how can they do that?
Yeah, please check us out on our website, which is kansasco-op.coop, or just visit your local cooperative. They're always looking for great people to be patrons. Maybe check and see if you're a member of a cooperative. Sometimes people don't realize that they actually are. Especially, I've noticed more in the financial space when I tell folks that, oh, did you know that your credit union is actually a cooperative? Oh, I had no idea. I actually had that conversation last week. So you may be a member and you don't even know it. So I encourage you just to get involved and engaged and understand what makes cooperative business structures different from non-cooperative business structures.
Okay, Brandi, thanks so much for joining us. And we celebrate with everyone, and October being Cooperative Month in Kansas. So sure appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ken. It's great to see you.
Brandi Miller, who is the president and CEO of the Kansas Cooperative Council, has joined us. We will have more coming up in just a moment.
Premier Farm and Home has what you need to make your lawn the best in the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Ken. We choose Premier Farm and Home for the professional look that we do ourselves.
Feel free to stop in. You can also visit our website at heycow.com.
Hi, my name is Rachel and I'm an agronomist from K-State, and today we're going to talk about corn germination and emergence. So I don't know if you have a favorite recipe, but there's certain ingredients that you have to make your favorite recipe. I really like chocolate chip cookies, and I have to have all the right things to make my chocolate chip cookies. When we're talking about corn germination, there are 3 main ingredients that we need to have for that corn seed to germinate successfully. The first is moisture, the second is oxygen, and the third is warmth. So if we're thinking about moisture, the first step of the germination process is water going into the seed. It's a process called imbibing. The corn is imbibing the water, and it has to take in 30% of its weight in water. And if you were to compare that to humans, if you weigh 100 pounds, that would be like you drinking 3.5 gallons of water. So it takes in a lot of water to start that process. When that water comes into the seed, that starts all the chemical reactions that are happening inside that seed for the germination process to work. And in order for those chemical reactions to happen, oxygen has to be present so that the corn seed can respire. That's the process of those chemical reactions happening. If we have oxygen, we have water, but there's a really important ingredient we haven't talked about yet, and that's warmth. So corn has a base temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that it needs to be at least 50 degrees for that corn plant to grow and develop. So that's the same for a corn seed too. If you put a corn seed in the soil and the soil temperature is not 50 degrees, your corn plant will not be able to germinate. It could actually rot in the soil if it doesn't have the warmth it needs to really get going. And germination, when we're talking about soil temperature, is really important for farmers because you want to make sure that your soil temperature is evenly, consistently between 50 and 55 degrees before you put your corn seeds in the ground to make sure that they all come up at the same time. So we talked about germination, which is the process of the embryo exiting the seed. So the radicle is the first part that comes out of the seed and it grows down and becomes the root. The coleoptile grows out of the embryo side of the seed and grows up, and that's the first thing we see. Emergence is the process of that plant coming up above the ground where we can see it. So germination is the embryo exiting the seed, and emergence would be when that plant comes above the ground where we can see it. And those are the two steps of germination and emergence for corn.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Wheat streak mosaic virus is a devastating disease in Kansas, and volunteer wheat in your field and all surrounding fields must be removed prior to planting. As farmers are currently drilling winter wheat across the state, be a good neighbor and control volunteer wheat. An infected field can impact thousands of acres in immediate proximity, depending on environmental factors. The drought over the previous years, combined with multiple issues during harvest, have created conditions that make wheat streak mosaic and related diseases an increased threat this year. Abandoned wheat, weedy patches that weren't harvested, and hail-shattered fields all favor an increased incidence of volunteer wheat. Wheat streak mosaic virus causes considerable damage to the Kansas wheat crop each year, primarily in the western portion of the state. In 2017, the disease caused a conservative $76.8 million in direct losses to wheat farmers, a loss of 19.2 million bushels of wheat. The 2017 loss was a 5.6% yield loss, up from an average 1.5% loss. For the past couple growing seasons, however, tests determined the disease showed up not only in western Kansas, but also in central Kansas. Wheat curl mites that spread wheat streak mosaic virus and other diseases survive the summer on volunteer wheat and certain grasses. Early planted wheat is likely to become infested and thus become infected with wheat streak mosaic virus, high plains virus, and triticum mosaic virus. For growers considering planting early, a good management consideration would be to select varieties with resistance to the wheat streak mosaic virus and/or tolerance to the wheat curl mite, especially in the western portions of the state. For more information on this devastating disease, download a packet of information or request a printed copy from Kansas Wheat.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
Our farmers and ranchers in western Kansas, in the Midwest total, with the long drought, I don't know how they would have made it without the Farm Bill. We're talking about 4 or 5 years of catastrophic crop losses and crop insurance and aid through the Farm Bill were many times the only ways some of these family farms made it through. Farming's a risky business because of the weather, because of all the unknowns. It provides for some stability within our community, and this just allows us a little bit of security to know that we can pay our bills in the end. We raise cattle, sheep, and then we grow corn, soybeans, and hay. We incorporate all three on all of our farm ground. We plant cover crops, we graze crop residue. We have livestock pretty much year-round on some piece of farm ground. We've partnered with the Natural Resource and Conservation Service to put in some buffer strips along creek banks that protect our watersheds. We've also started planting cover crops and used technical assistance from them in planting those cover crops. We also have quite extensively used the EQIP program to remove invasive species from our native range. So EQIP has partnered with us to control and to bring some of our pastures back. In our crop ground, they've helped us with technical advice when it comes to cover crops and no-till and things that we can do to save some of our soil. Well, I think second to our national security is food security, and the knowledge that we have a safe, abundant food supply in our grocery stores at all time. I think that benefits all of us to not worry about where our food's going to come from. We got a little taste of that during COVID. I think that drove home the message of why the Farm Bill is so critical, not only to farmers and ranchers, but also to consumers.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
The Kansas State University College of Veterinary Medicine has received 2 grants to fund research for vaccine development to protect cattle and swine from infectious diseases. Combined, the grants exceed $1.2 million and are funded for a 3-year period by a National Institute of Food and Agriculture initiative that was originally established by Congress in the 2008 Farm Bill, then reauthorized in the 2018 Farm Bill. One of the research projects is focused on developing a vaccine to protect against all strains of the bovine parainfluenza virus and bovine viral diarrhea virus in cattle. The other project is centered around vaccines targeting African swine fever, a lethal disease in both domestic and wild pigs. Attempts to develop safe vaccines capable of protecting against African swine fever have been largely unsuccessful to this point. According to David Rosowski, Vice President of Research at the college, the development of these vaccines is of global significance. He said K-State continues to be an international leader in animal health and biosecurity, and university researchers are committed to domestic and international collaborations to find solutions to these aggressive diseases.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
This is Jake McCall with Pinion Ag. As harvest continues, we have seen fairly muted price action in the grain and oilseed markets. Yield reports have revealed many surprises in both directions throughout the country as we start to discover the results of a summer with very interesting weather patterns. The corn market is reluctant so far to make any decisive moves after putting in contract lows at $4.67 3/4 last week and has mostly stayed in a 30-cent range between $4.70 and $5 since the beginning of August. We did have a neutral to bullish ethanol report this week, with production up 3% from last week and 18% from last year, while at the same time stocks also increased, reflecting a weakened demand picture on that front. Soybeans have been oscillating between technical factors on the charts after dropping $1 in the past 30 days from recent highs. One of the biggest factors facing the grains at this point is that the Mississippi River levels are severely down, causing a lack of export capability as we move into harvest. This is seen clearly in basis levels at the river terminals, widening by over $1 in some cases, as elevators try to discourage farmers from delivering out of the fields. The markets will be watching closely the quarterly stocks report that will give us a look into what the USDA estimates our current production levels at. In the livestock markets, both live and feeder cattle have faced headwinds recently, with weakness in the stock market suggesting possible demand questions. Certainly, cattle feeders are nervous to pay record prices for calves that will require steep premiums in order to make money when they go to the packer. But for now, cautious optimism reigns, with no end in sight into shrinking cow herds across the country. In outside markets, crude oil continues on a very strong bullish trend that it has held since late June, a factor that grain should not ignore, as King crude can often correlate strongly with the ethanol and biodiesel industries. The dollar, however, has also seen a strong rally in the same time period as a flight to quality in uncertain times, and that contributes to the export dilemma American farmers are facing, making the U.S. a more expensive option on the global market, especially keeping in mind another expected record crop in South America. If you have any questions about marketing or risk management for your operation, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 888-452-8751. I'm Jake McCall with Pinion Ag, and I hope you have a great and productive day.
That's our program this week. Be social with us online at kansasagreport.net or our social media channels. It is harvest time around Kansas. It is payday for the farmers and ranchers that work hard all year long. Take some extra time. Be careful as those big machines, combines, trucks, grain carts, and so on go from field to field to help feed all of us. I'm Ken Rogers. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next week for the Kansas Ag Report.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.